One morning, a farmer becomes very sad upon seeing his fields destroyed. He calls his 3 sons and assigns them the responsibility of protecting the farm. The youngest son, John, is very lazy, so his elder brothers convince him to guard the farm alone. John agrees and starts taking care of the fields. While guarding the fields, John hears a strange noise. When he turns around, he sees a large white horse standing behind him. Surprised, John tries to catch the horse and ties it with a rope. However, the horse tries to escape and drags John along with it. After a while, the horse loses its balance and falls into a swamp. John pulls the horse out of the swamp and notices tears in its eyes. The horse thanks John and leaves. When John returns home, he hears another strange noise coming from the field. He goes back and finds 2 horses tied there. Suddenly, a small horse, called a foal, appears and explains that its mother is pleased with John because he helped her. The foal tells John that his mother has sent him a gift. John feels happy, but just then, his father calls him. John goes outside and tries to stop his father from entering. After his father leaves, John mounts the foal, which begins to run very fast. John is astonished. The foal lets out a sharp whistle, and 2 more horses appear immediately. John thinks that selling these horses could earn him a lot of money. When he reaches the market, people are amazed at the beauty of the horses. Many are eager to buy them. The foal advises John to sell the horses to an old man, but John insists on selling them to the king. When the king arrives, his minister accuses John of stealing the horses. Taking advantage of the situation, the king seizes both horses without paying for them. When John asks for his money, the king ignores him and leaves. The foal scolds John and reminds him that it had advised him to sell the horses to the old man. Seeing John upset, the foal whistles again, and the horses return to John. The horses overturn the king's carriage, causing the king to fall into a sack of flour. Despite his royal status, the king cannot express his anger publicly. Ultimately, the king agrees to pay for the horses. John demands a high price, prompting the king's advisors to suggest hiring John as a worker to avoid further trouble. The king offers John a job, and John accepts. Following this, one of the king's advisors suggests assigning John the task of capturing the Firebird, a mythical bird, hoping the dangerous mission will lead to John's failure, giving the king a reason to punish him. John agrees to take on the challenge. When the foal learns about the mission, it warns John of the dangers, explaining that no one who has sought the Firebird has ever returned. Despite the warning, John decides to proceed. The foal takes John into the forest and shows him a special type of nut called the dream nut. The foal explains that the Firebird loves these nuts, and eating them will make it fall asleep. Together, they scatter the nuts on the ground and wait. After some time, the Firebird, attracted by the scent of the nuts, arrives. It eats the nuts and begins to fall asleep. However, just as John is about to capture it, the Firebird regains its strength and starts chasing John and the foal. Flames spread throughout the forest as the bird gives chase. Eventually, the Firebird catches up to John and the foal. But John quickly throws the last dream nut in front of the bird. The Firebird eats it and falls into a deep sleep. The next morning, when the Firebird wakes up, it finds itself bound in chains. Seeing tears in the bird's eyes, John feels pity for it and sets it free. The Firebird spreads its dazzling wings and, before flying away, gives one of its radiant feathers to John as a gift. The feather emits warmth and light. The foal warns John that the king will never forgive him for freeing the Firebird. When John returns to the king and presents the feather as proof, its glow has already faded. The king, refusing to believe John's story, grows furious and orders his execution. Just as preparations for John's punishment are underway, the Firebird suddenly appears. The Firebird convinces the king and his court of John's honesty. Its presence saves John's life. The king retracts his order and not only forgives John but also promotes him to a higher position. However, deep inside, the king becomes even more enraged. The king instructs his minister to devise a new plan. The minister suggests assigning John the task of bringing back the princess from the distant Sa mountains. He explains that if John fails, the king can finally rid himself of him, and if John succeeds, the king can marry the princess. The idea delights the king, and he sends John on this new mission. John sets out on his journey to the Sa mountains and finds the path to the castle covered in thick layers of ice, making it nearly impossible to proceed. Suddenly, the Firebird's feather appears and melts the ice, creating a pathway. However, as the wall of ice collapses, a flood of water rushes through, sweeping the foal away. The foal rolls down the mountain like a snowball. Inside the castle, John discovers many sleeping girls, making it almost impossible to identify the real princess. At that moment, the Firebird's feather falls near one of the girls. John realizes she is the true princess. John is awestruck by the princess's beauty. He tells her that the king wishes to marry her. Smiling, the princess responds, "If the king is so powerful, he should have come to me himself." The princess leaps off the mountain, and without a second thought, John jumps after her, risking his life. At the same moment, the foal arrives just in time to catch them both on its back, saving them from harm. The foal senses that John is developing feelings for the princess and realizes that if the king discovers this, it could lead to serious trouble. The princess, secretly overhearing their conversation, realizes that she, too, is developing feelings for John. When they return to the king, the court is awestruck by the princess's beauty. Seeing John alive, the king becomes furious, but his minister reminds him that promoting John could be politically advantageous. John, worried about the princess's safety, sneaks off to meet her. Before he can speak with her, the king's men arrive and take the princess away. The king proposes marriage to the princess, but she sets a condition: she will only marry him if he retrieves her grandmother's lost ring from the ocean. The king is distressed by this demand. Just then, John arrives, and the king assigns him the task of finding the ring. John turns to the foal for help. The foal has no knowledge of the ring, but decides to ask its mother. The foal's mother reveals that the ring is inside the stomach of a giant whale that lives near a small island. John and the foal set out to retrieve the ring. When they reach the location, John discovers that the enormous whale is chained and unable to move. Diving underwater, he realizes that the entire island is, in fact, the whale itself. John asks the whale why it is chained. The whale explains that it accidentally swallowed several ships, which enraged sailors who then bound it in chains. The whale expresses regret for its actions and wishes to make amends. Moved by the whale's story, John devises a plan to make the whale sneeze and expel the ships and everything else trapped inside it. As per the plan, John climbs into the whale's nose and tickles it. The whale sneezes, expelling the ships trapped in its stomach. Relieved of its burden, the whale happily swims away into the ocean. As the whale departs, John suddenly remembers the ring and becomes disheartened. At that moment, a crab emerges, holding the ring. The crab explains that the whale had entrusted the ring to it as a gift for John, recognizing his kindness and compassionate heart. Grateful, John takes the ring and returns to the princess. When John presents the ring to the princess, she realizes the extent of his care and the lengths he is willing to go for her. Meanwhile, the king's men notice something unusual about the foal. One of them spies on the foal using a telescope and overhears its conversation. They report this to the king. When the king sees the foal near the princess's window, he is overcome with rage. In his fury, the king shoots an arrow at the foal. John tries desperately to save the foal, but the arrow strikes it, leaving it gravely injured. The king then accuses John of plotting to abduct the princess, strips him of his rank, and announces that John will be punished in a few days. The princess secretly visits the injured foal and confesses that John is in danger because of her. She reveals that she devised this plan to avoid marrying the king. She also tells the foal about a ritual she described to the king, claiming it would make anyone who performed it young and powerful again. The ritual requires 3 cauldrons, one filled with hot water, one with cold water, and one with boiling milk. The king, eager to test this ritual, decides to have John undergo it first. To protect John, the princess devises a secret plan. She explains to the foal that placing her grandmother's ring in the first cauldron, the firebird's feather in the second, and the flower of life and death in the third will ensure John's survival. The magical elements will shield him from harm and ensure his safety through the dangerous trial. Foal, still injured, asks about the flower of life and death. The princess explains that these rare flowers grow at the edge of the world and are extremely difficult to find. Despite his injuries, Foal reassures her that his speed makes the task possible. The next morning, the cauldrons are prepared. The king announces to the crowd that he is giving John a second chance. He claims that if John survives the ritual, he will be forgiven and set free. As the king pushes John into the first cauldron, the princess secretly drops her ring into the water. The ring's magic works, protecting John, who emerges unharmed and moves toward the second cauldron. The firebird, hearing the commotion, arrives and dives into the cauldron, infusing it with its protective energy. Finally, John is pushed into the third cauldron, filled with boiling milk. Everyone holds their breath, wondering if he will survive. At the same time, Foal reaches the edge of the world and finds the flower of life and death. Before plucking the flower, he senses that doing so could cost him his life. Despite the danger, Foal shows great courage, plucks the flower, and speeds back to the palace. In the palace, everyone believes John has perished in the third cauldron. Saddened, the crowd begins to disperse. At that moment, Foal arrives and throws the magical flower into the cauldron. Within moments, John emerges from the cauldron unharmed and transformed into a handsome prince. Seeing this, the greedy king, wanting to become young and powerful himself, jumps into the first cauldron. Instead of becoming youthful, he gets trapped in a bubble and floats away, never to return. The crowd rejoices, declaring John as their new king, thanking him for his bravery and kindness. John and the princess then set out to find Foal, who believes he is dying. However, the princess reassures him that the flower of life and death only tested his courage and loyalty, and he is safe. In the final scene, John and the princess are married in a grand ceremony. The story concludes with everyone living happily ever after. Please like and subscribe for more video like this. Thanks for watching.